Donald Trump's DOJ facing pressure in person for hiding even more Epstein documents. By in person, I mean what we're watching play out right now. Top House Democrats and lawmakers are meeting with embattled Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy AG Blanche over the hiding of files and alleged abuse of redactions. The meeting is confidential. It's happening at this hour. If we get any news, we'll bring it to you. Congressman Garcia says the meeting itself will not substitute for a further grilling under oath.
There's been some reporting that somehow they're not interested in doing the full subpoena conversation and the deposition under oath. This is not a substitute for that. And so that is the very first thing that I'm going to remind the Attorney General of.
That's new from Garcia as they talk about that meeting. Bondi has faced MAGA blowback already and even calls for impeachment. She's had several Epstein debacles. There was the Binder incident, Bindergate, where basically she oversaw a lying campaign that claimed to release Epstein files and documents in those binders, but it was a lie, and there was backlash over that. Bondi famously claimed she had a client list on her desk at the beginning of last year. Trump supporters did not take well to all that. There was a revolt over several of those misleading spectacles. There were her other false claims about basically the fact that other men linked to Epstein in the material they had even before the files came out. They were all cleared of wrongdoing, she said. No further cases possible. Well, that, of course, has been shredded by other countries pursuing cases against people linked to Epstein. We cannot tell you legally that all those cases are going to result one way or the other, but her initial claim that there was literally nothing else to investigate, nothing to see here, well, those kind of self-destructed. The news now is that Congress is officially subpoenaing Bondi over Epstein, which shows bipartisan pressure. Remember, Congress is controlled by Republicans. You need some of them to get any subpoena out there. She's, of course, tangled with Congress before. Now she has a high-stakes date, April 14th, for this testimony. And as her actions are drawing fire, the administration also tried to put a different face forward. So while she is still AG, she hasn't been impeached or released yet, her deputy, Todd Blanche, a Trump loyalist, led the first files release, signed those letters to Congress when they started doing the piecemeal release. Also, he did the press on the Epstein files rollout while she stepped back. Now, deputy attorney generals sometimes have various portfolio duties, but everyone noticed that because this was a huge deal, and they'd sidelined her. Lawmakers now concerned that he's pushing a cover-up, new heat on hiding the full unredacted Epstein documents about a DEA money laundering probe from 2015. And at the risk of giving everyone a little deja vu, this is that document. You've seen this kind of redactions before. I will say, in fairness to DOJ, that they did release a lot of unredacted and real material in that 3 million file release. But this right here is part of 69 pages from this DEA probe that was heavily redacted. The investigation was on illicit funding or distribution of so-called club drugs and an alleged prostitution ring. Bloomberg has reported on this, and they were reviewing both Epstein himself, but also over 10 other people back in 2015. So folks are asking in Congress, with all this time passed and Epstein being dead, why is this so super redacted? Remember, these kind of redactions, when you deal with CIA or certain issues, they are unfortunately common. But Congress passed a law, a veto-proof law we all watched, that said that kind of redaction itself is not allowed. The stuff that's normally redacted, they said, should be unredacted. If there are names, which there's no name this long, of names of victims, those kind of things under the law can still be redacted, but not pages and pages. Meanwhile, Blanche is the rare official who actually felt the need to clarify. In case you were confused, he says he's not defending Epstein. He's just explaining the process.
I'm not trying to defend Epstein. I'm not. And I do defend the work that this department is doing today, right now, which is going after every single perpetrator anywhere. And if there's a narrative that exists that we're ignoring Epstein victims, that is false.
Pushing back, defending, saying that's a narrative. But, of course, it's the Epstein victims who've been saying that. And you can't reduce their testimony, much of it nonpartisan. They're not here, most of them, with some apparent axe to grind, as a, quote, narrative. And then there are the ways that this administration, having released the files, has stoked more questions. We have reported on the questions around Epstein's in-custody death. Our special report and timeline used the newly released files, which, as I mentioned, it's good we finally got them from the government if you're interested in the facts and transparency. But we also learned through those files about the DOJ's past misstatements on this very issue. The questions, meanwhile, are only rising in Washington. If you happen to catch this report, you may say, okay, so people are asking questions, the media is asking questions, this is an MS Now original investigative report, but it turns out now we're seeing the overlapping issue and questions also posed in D.C. Blanche was asked about it.
And are you guys completely confident that it was indeed suicide?
Yes, we're confident.
There's also new questions about an orange-colored figure going up the stairs towards Epstein's cell around 10:39 p.m. the night he died. Do you know who that person was?
I don't think we know.
Wouldn't that fall within the window when Epstein could have died?
I think that falls within the window of when he could have died.
Why has none of the guards been held legally accountable?
Well, they were. Two of them were prosecuted, and ultimately there was a non-prosecution agreement. It may not be the accountability that you want or that others want, but there was accountability.
Now, there are some answers. He's on a podcast there with an individual who is affiliated with the Trump administration. The questions are useful. You can take him and what he's saying in the answer. One of the questions there that she posed cites the kind of reporting that we and CBS and some other journalists have done, which found that on video, the FBI saw what appeared to be an inmate or a person in orange that night, and yet the DOJ described it differently. And Blanche says, yep, that could have been within the window. So he's sort of acknowledging that open question. He also said, well, there was accountability for those guards. That's not the case. As we showed in the death timeline, you see prison guards indicted there in the middle next to the Epstein photo, but to the right, as we showed you, the charges were dropped. Now, we don't know what would have happened if they'd continued the case. It was unusual to indict and drop the charges. Here we have the Deputy Attorney General seemingly wanting to defend everything the government and the DOJ has done, even though that happened in the past. But that's certainly not accountability. You drop the charges, you're not finishing that case. The government has had some problems with accountability and transparency on this for years. And I want to be clear. What you heard there from Todd Blanche was his claims that basically they never did anything wrong, not while he's in charge and not previously. And that's just false, because we showed you in our reporting and many different accounts about the problems here, and you've probably heard the victims talk about it. And that also includes Merrick Garland's DOJ. The misleading report about that same video was published by the Inspector General during the Garland Justice Department. And so you're reminded that they don't even bother to blame the past. They're so afraid, apparently, of this story, they say everything was fine. And that's not on the level. Today, it's not Merrick Garland, and it's not the history. Today, it is the Trump administration in charge, Bondi and Blanche. And they're getting apparently a failing grade from many members of Congress who worked on a bipartisan basis to pass this law. And they are demanding full compliance with the law, and they're demanding more than the occasional friendly podcast interview. Bondi will be going under oath. With all of this news in tonight and the meeting I mentioned, I want to bring in Emily Bazelon, New York Times Magazine, legal writer there, who's looked at this story without fear or favor, as we say. Welcome back.
Thanks so much, Ari.
I'll give you a two-part question up top. This is the easy part. You know, is this good enough? Or does Congress have a point that there might be a more accurate way to redact to protect whoever, including victims, but not do this? And second, what do you think of my observation about Blanche, that there's such tension and secrecy here? I'm going to grant him the competence that he knows the Inspector General report came out under the Biden-Garland Justice Department, written by Michael Horowitz, et cetera. He's a lawyer. I'm going to grant him he knows that, and yet he doesn't even say, hey, they might have made some mistakes. He keeps saying everything's fine, and it's not fine.
Yeah, well, to start with your easy question, no, that is not what a redaction would look like, given what we know about what Congress decreed in this act that it passed. That just looks like a kind of blanket. You can't know anything about this investigation, and that seems hard to justify. I think you're completely right about Blanche. He is trying to say everything's fine, nothing to see here, but also we prosecute everyone. And we've been yelling and screaming and hoping people will come and give us information. That was his response to the British potential prosecution of Prince Andrew. as if we don't have the same information they have, and as if there aren't all kinds of questions swirling around and this still kind of essential mystery, given how giant this conspiracy was and how many people were victimized by it. How can it possibly be that there's nobody else to prosecute, right? I still don't feel like I understand the answer to that question. And Blanche has to both say, or try to say, we're doing everything, we're tough, and also, but there's nothing to indict here.
Yeah, and the Bondi memo, which said we're not going any further because there's nothing else to see, there's no client list, there's no evidence of blackmail, she said, and there's no one else to research. But other countries have already found there are people worth researching. There have been arrests in the UK.
Exactly. And that is just hard to square. And I think, the reason some of the senators are focusing on this particular DEA document is that it would seem to have the kinds of facts in it that you could then wonder, well, why weren't the people named in this as potential co-conspirators? Why weren't they indicted? And there could be perfectly good reasons for that. And normally, outside of this particular law Congress passed, DOJ would not release information about people who they decided not to prosecute, right? Because we let people go on with their lives, and we trust the government usually to decide whether it's worth indicting someone or not. But this case seems so different, given its scope, given the, sweetheart deal that Epstein received himself. And because of all of that, it's just a different set of circumstances. And I think it's just very hard for Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi to put to rest all the doubts that they, in fact, stirred up when Bondi started talking about this client list.